as we head into the afternoon hours. And here's a look at again those rain chances increasing this afternoon, and by later this evening as colder air starts to mix in, potentially could see a little snow trying to mix in overnight tonight. Not expecting many travel problems with this, but the fact that we have the potential to see at least even a rain-snow mix is incredible for this time of year. Looking cold even into the upcoming weekend.
Well, I tell you, that kind of forecast right there really does not make me want to go catfishing here in Oklahoma this weekend. But a lot of catfish anglers are faced with cold front conditions, whether it be in February, whether it be in May. Nothing this severe will happen in Oklahoma in July, but there are still cold fronts and there are still big high pressures that move in on anglers from time to time. And learning how to manipulate the size of your bait and where to target catfish can really make a big difference from day to day on how many catfish you put in your boat. Now, a lot of people don't really know it, but and I've never really went into great detail at Team Catfish about my past fishing experience and past history, how I learned to catch these catfish, and how the Team Catfish brand was built. I'd like to just share a little bit of information with you about that and then explain to you why I feel like I've got a couple tips that catfish anglers can really put in their tackle box that's going to help them catch more fish during cold front conditions. I started guiding when I was 16 years old, and I've always been a multi-species guide, but catfish anglers catfish were always my favorite fish to catch. Though I've spent more time fishing for catfish than all the other species probably combined. By the time I got to be about 25 years old, I was a full-time guide guiding primarily for blue catfish on Grand Lake in northeast Oklahoma and Lake of the Ozarks and Truman Lake in Missouri. And I guided for catfish up until about 2008 when Team Catfish brand really started to take off. The last 2 years I was a full-time guide at Lake of the Ozarks. I had one fishless trip in 2 years. I was guiding 225 days a year for nothing but blue catfish during that time. A few hybrid striper trips, but mainly blue catfish. And I can tell you folks, I learned a few things. When you spend that much time on the water, cold fronts make a big impact on how you target fish from day to day. Now, take away from this video what you want, but fishing is not an exact science, but you have to play the odds in your favor, especially when you're trying to put fish in the boat for clients on a day-to-day basis. And when these big, nasty cold fronts moved in on us, two things that I would have to do to become more efficient at targeting fish and big fish. The first one was downsize my baits. If it was 80 degrees yesterday and had a nice south wind, I might be using a big long piece of shad with dead red blood spray on it, and I'd be catching all kinds of fish from 2 pounds to 30 pounds on this size of bait right here. If you're in the Mississippi River, you might be fishing with a bait this big, or you're over at Wilson Lake in Alabama, you might be fishing with a huge piece of skipjack on those warm front condition days when it just feels good outside. You're glad to be out there and fishing. Typically, those are the days when you can get away with fishing a lot bigger bait, a lot bigger hook. Now, when this big old cold front blows in, like this one's working on us right now, I would stack the odds in my favor. Especially if I started seeing some short strikes where the blue cats weren't really pulling the rod down, I would start decreasing the size of my bait, and in some situations, in some cases, I might be down to a bait that's about this wide, and I would go from an 8/0 double action down to a 5/0 double action hook in the summer, and I would even step down to a 3/0 double action during severe cold fronts in really, really cold weather at Lake of the Ozarks when I was fishing the Osage River. During really bad cold fronts in the winter, and the water's cold anyway, sometimes I would just be fishing with a little tiny shad head, and I would be catching 30, 40, and 50-pound fish on a 3/0 double action hook with just a little piece of bait, when you couldn't get a big blue catfish to touch a piece of bait that was any bigger than that. Now, I would like for catfish anglers to also implement some of this information when it comes to dip bait, because dip bait works the same way, manufactured bait works the same way as natural bait. You don't go out and you fish with a great big furry thing in cold water. You use a little tiny piece of bait in cold water, 40 degrees and down. And when these big cold fronts come in on you in the spring and the summertime, it would be wise for you to put the big furry thing bait holder down, and maybe even on when the fish are real finicky during these cold fronts, cut that dead red dip tube down into 3 little pieces and put it on your hook, and use a lot smaller manufactured bait than you would on the feel-good day when you got a nice south wind at 60, 70, 80 degrees outside. Now, the other tip that I'm going to give you when it comes to fishing cold fronts is what fish do, and this is not just catfish, but most of the time when the big cold front comes in, your fish become a lot less active. And when they become a lot less active, a lot of times they move into heavy cover, heavy structure. And you got to fish in some of the tightest, nastiest woods, rock, trees, treetops, submerged cover underwater to really catch a lot of fish and catch the biggest fish. And, you know, I saw that day after day after day when targeting and trying to target big blue catfish was if I would downsize my bait and I would fish right in the heaviest cover that I could find on my electronics, I could produce fish on a daily basis. Those are my tips from Team Catfish and Jeff Williams when it comes to fishing cold front conditions. I saw this on TV this morning. I DVR'd that little clip because I knew that this was information that catfish anglers could really use. Downsize your baits and fish heavier cover the next time that big nasty cold front rolls in on you, and I bet you will become more productive. Thanks for watching the Team Catfish videos.